Honeysuckle Parkway curved gracefully through Pinewood Acres, a suburban neighborhood brimming with pastel-colored houses and manicured lawns. The streets were lined with young magnolia trees, and the yards reflected the pride of their owners. Neatly trimmed bushes, fresh coats of paint, and flower beds that seemed to bloom in perfect synchrony. At a glance, Pinewood Acres embodied the ideal of suburban harmony. Small families strolled the sidewalks on bright afternoons. Neighbors waved amiably from their porches, and the whole place exuded a sense of coordinated, peaceful living. Yet behind that picturesque facade lurked a dynamic familiar to many communities, the ever-watchful, ever-intrusive Homeowners Association, or HOA. Pinewood Acres HOA was known for meticulously monitoring everything from holiday decorations to the shade of a front door. The rules were strict, and while some residents appreciated the uniformity, others found themselves chafing under the burden of constant scrutiny. No single person embodied the HOA's less-than-pleasant side more vividly than Marilyn Graves, though virtually everyone called her Karen. She was a middle-aged woman with a short, voluminous haircut and a penchant for immaculate capri pants. She had moved to Pinewood Acres 7 years prior after a contentious divorce, determined to impose her vision of order upon the neighborhood. While she held the official title of HOA treasurer, it was an open secret that she also acted as the de facto chief enforcer, outdoing even the HOA president in zeal. Karen had an eagle eye for anything that contradicted the neighborhood's standards. If a garage door looked slightly off-white rather than pure white, she was on the phone to the offending homeowner. If kids set up a lemonade stand without prior notice, especially if the sign was a neon color, she cited a bylaw about unapproved business signage. The HOA's covenant had never been so exhaustively wielded against the very residents it was meant to serve. Some neighbors, particularly those with children, resented Karen's heavy-handed approach, while others quietly submitted, fearing retribution. Her catchphrase, uttered whenever she found a perceived violation, was, "We must preserve the quality of Pinewood Acres." Despite her polarizing presence, or perhaps because of it, the neighborhood continued to revolve around the bright green lawns and pastel houses, bound by strict rules. Few suspected that a single, modest event, planned to celebrate the neighborhood's children, would soon turn into a standoff with Pinewood Acres' self-declared guardian of peace. Late in the spring, word began circulating about a small, casual event meant to celebrate the children of Pinewood Acres, a community talent show. It was the brainchild of a group of mothers who often met at the local park while their kids played on the swings. Among them was Sylvia Dawson, a cheerful woman with a background in elementary education who had always championed neighborhood unity. Sylvia sent out emails and tucked flyers into mailboxes, describing a relaxed, outdoor gathering where children could sing, recite poems, play instruments, anything that gave them a chance to shine. The location would be Clover Field, a modest patch of grassy land near the neighborhood's central gazebo. The date was set for a Sunday afternoon in May. Admission would be free. Families could bring blankets, folding chairs, and snacks, forming a makeshift amphitheater around a small wooden stage the HOA had installed years ago for summer concerts. Initially, the idea drew warm approval from parents. The kids buzzed with excitement about performing. Some were only 6 or 7 years old, eagerly practicing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," while older children planned short comedic routines or carefully chosen pop songs. The entire concept felt harmless, if not downright heartwarming. But if Pinewood Acres had learned anything, it was that no gathering, however innocent, could occur without Karen's input. People speculated about her reaction. She was known to be sensitive to noise disturbances, especially those involving children. In fact, rumors circulated that at a birthday party last year, Karen had appeared uninvited and demanded the music be turned down. Another neighbor whispered that Karen had once typed up a 5-page letter complaining about squeaky swings at the playground. Sylvia and her co-organizers believed they could navigate Karen's concerns. They filed the correct paperwork with the HOA, detailing that the event would last from 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., not too late in the evening, and use only a modest sound system. The plan was for a small speaker, 1 or 2 microphones, and perhaps some background music. Certainly, it didn't approach rock concert levels. Nevertheless, the organizers braced for confrontation. Karen sat on the board that would approve or reject the event. They figured she might impose constraints, like limiting the decibel level or requiring parking guidelines. But they hoped she wouldn't ban it outright. Pinewood Acres needed this cheerful spark, especially after a dull winter cooped up indoors. As the date approached, the approval process dragged. Weeks passed with no official response, leaving families in limbo. Sylvia gently pressed the HOA for an update. The president, an affable man named Walter Leong, apologized and said the board was still discussing some details. Everyone read between the lines. Karen was likely stalling or searching for reasons to derail the show. Yet eventually, after mounting pressure from parents, the HOA issued a single-page letter giving the event a conditional green light. The letter contained half a dozen rules about sound volume, event cleanup, and a strict cutoff time. But it was enough. The show was on. As the chosen Sunday approached, families scrambled to finalize their kids' performances. Living rooms and backyards across Pinewood Acres echoed with the sounds of youngsters singing, strumming ukuleles, or practicing lines of Shakespeare. Some children wrote homemade poems about summer, while others planned comedic skits featuring stuffed animals. A few shy kids needed coaxing to sign up, but neighbors reassured them. It's just for fun. Sylvia and the other volunteer organizers spent hours collecting the necessary gear: a small mixing board, a couple of microphones, extension cords, and portable speakers. They planned to set up at Clover Field early on Sunday morning. Because the stage was only a foot high, they needed to ensure the little ones wouldn't trip. A few local dads offered to build a short ramp so the kids could climb on and off the platform safely. Meanwhile, in the background, Karen's disapproval had become increasingly tangible. She posted on the community's digital forum a note about how excessive noise disrupts the peace and can damage property values if it becomes a frequent occurrence. She didn't mention the talent show by name, but her tone hinted strongly at it. Some neighbors commented politely, reminding her it was only a one-day event. Karen shot back by quoting the HOA regulations on permissible decibel levels, implying that if the show got out of hand, there could be penalties or even future bans. Despite this tension, excitement prevailed among most residents. "She can't spoil this," murmured James Porter, a local father. "Kids deserve a chance to show off their talents without some killjoy breathing down their necks." Others worried that Karen might show up mid-show with a decibel meter in hand, but they resolved not to let fear overshadow the day's celebratory nature. Some of the older children made small handmade posters to display around Clover Field. The mothers arranged a sign-up sheet for each act, giving every child a rough time slot to avoid confusion. A few neighbors donated canopies in case of bright sun or a drizzle. Throughout all the planning, the hush of unease regarding Karen's next move lingered, but no one wanted to bring negativity to an event meant for laughter and cheers. Sunday morning arrived bright and mild. Sunlight filtered through the tall oaks that ringed Clover Field, and the air carried a gentle warmth that hinted at the coming summer. Families began trickling in as early as 10 a.m. to help set up. Sylvia, wearing a broad sun hat, directed volunteers on where to place folding chairs and how to run the extension cords from a nearby outlet to the stage. Laughter and chatter filled the air as children hopped around, too excited to stand still. By noon, a cluster of about 20 neighbors had assembled the stage area. A low, makeshift curtain pinned to posts provided a sense of backstage. 2 or 3 tables near the gazebo displayed sign-up sheets, free water bottles, and small snacks. The speaker system hummed quietly. A local teenager, known for his tech savvy, tested the microphones with quick check 1-2 calls, occasionally breaking into comedic impressions that made the kids giggle. Parents arrived in groups, carrying picnic blankets or lawn chairs, guiding their eager children. Some kids clutched sheet music or scribbled lines on note cards. Others wore playful outfits, sparkly t-shirts, tutus, or their Sunday best. A sense of communal pride blossomed around Clover Field. Even neighbors without kids stopped by, drawn by the lively atmosphere. The day felt poised for success. Amid this cheerful bustle, Karen arrived around 1 p.m., cutting a solitary figure. She wore a crisp, collared shirt and white pants, her expression unreadable behind large sunglasses. A few neighbors attempted a friendly wave, but she offered only a curt nod. She circled the perimeter of Clover Field, scanning the equipment and stage arrangement as if inspecting a crime scene. Now and then, she took out her phone and typed notes. People pretended not to notice, though tension prickled. The organizers exchanged worried glances. Sylvia, mustering her courage, approached Karen with a bright smile. "We're happy you came to see the show," she said, her voice gentle but warm. "The kids have been practicing for weeks. Hope you enjoy it." Karen's lips twitched in what might have been an attempt at a smile. "I'm here in my capacity as HOA treasurer to ensure everything remains within the guidelines," she said. "I trust you've read the noise level limits in the letter?" Sylvia nodded. "We have. We'll be mindful, I promise." Karen glanced at the cluster of kids on stage. "Let's hope so. The last thing we need is rowdiness." Then she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Sylvia exhaling a stressed breath. She tried to shake off the unease. This day was for the children, not for Karen's negativity. By 2 p.m., Cloverfield was alive with color and energy. An estimated 50 to 60 people, parents, kids, plus a few retirees, gathered on the grass. Many brought homemade signs cheering on their little performers. The stage's small speaker system emitted a pleasant, moderate volume of background music, setting the tone without overwhelming the space. Sylvia stood at a small podium near the stage to MC. "Welcome, everyone, to Pinewood Acres' first ever community talent show," she announced. Applause rippled through the crowd. "We're so proud of our children for sharing their talents with us. Let's cheer them on with lots of love, all right." The first act was a group of 5-year-olds singing a simple tune about friendship. The microphone carried their sweet, slightly off-key voices across Cloverfield, and the audience responded with encouraging claps. Next, an 8-year-old recited a short Shel Silverstein poem with animated gestures. A 10-year-old followed on her guitar, plucking out a tentative but charming folk melody. Karen lingered near the back, arms folded. Some watchers wondered if she might complain the volume was too loud, but she remained silent. Only her stern gaze, peering over the tops of her sunglasses, hinted at her displeasure. Perhaps she realized that, with so many supportive families present, confrontation might backfire. The show continued. A young boy performed a comedy routine about life in Pinewood Acres, joking about the funny rules we follow. The audience chuckled, especially at a line about someone who measures your grass with a ruler, and a few heads instinctively swiveled toward Karen's direction. She maintained her stony composure, but her jaw tightened. Despite Karen's presence, joy radiated from the crowd each time a child finished an act. The performers gleefully bounded off stage, receiving high fives from parents. Cameras snapped photos, grandparents dabbed tears from their eyes, and younger siblings hopped around in excitement. The atmosphere was exactly what the organizers had hoped for, a celebration of youth and creativity. Shortly after 3 p.m., the show was in full swing. The small wooden stage sparkled in the afternoon sun, and the final acts lined up eagerly backstage. A few older kids were set to perform more advanced pieces, one with a violin solo, another reciting Shakespeare monologues. Karen, observing from afar, took a phone call and disappeared briefly down a sidewalk. Some assumed she had left, perhaps placated that the volume was modest. In truth, she was looping around behind the row of hedges that bordered Cloverfield, unseen by most. There, hidden behind the stage's backdrop, coiled the sound system's cables. They ran from a portable generator to the mixing board, from the mixing board to the microphones, neatly taped in place. Anyone paying close attention might have spotted a flash of white pants slipping between the hedges. The show was mid-performance, a 12-year-old singing "Over the Rainbow," so nearly all eyes were on stage. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, small sounds told a more sinister story. The snip of wire cutters, the soft rustle of severed cable being yanked away. At 3:10 p.m., the next child stepped on stage to recite a poem she'd written herself. She tapped the microphone to ensure it was working, and Sylvia nodded encouragement from the sidelines. But the moment the girl opened her mouth, the microphone crackled, then died. An awkward hush fell. The child tapped it again, frowned, and tried to speak. Nothing. Sylvia hurried to the mixing board and fiddled with the dials, but the sound remained dead. Panicked murmurs spread through the audience. Was it a power outage? A glitch? "Sorry, folks," Sylvia called out, her voice raised so the crowd could hear. "We seem to be having a technical difficulty. Bear with us." She and a couple of volunteers scrambled backstage, only to discover that multiple cables had been severed. Bright copper wiring stuck out from cleanly snipped ends. A wave of disbelief washed over them. Who would do this? One volunteer gasped, inspecting the damage. The cables weren't merely loose. They were slashed to the point of no easy repair. The power connection to the speaker had also been tampered with. It would take more than a few minutes to rewire. Meanwhile, the crowd sat in confusion. Some kids near the front were on the verge of tears, uncertain why everything had stopped so suddenly. Sylvia's heart thudded. Sabotage? Who would do such a thing? The answer seemed obvious. There was only one person who had both motive and a proven record of meddling. Yet the idea that Karen would go so far as to physically destroy equipment was both shocking and infuriating. Regardless, the show had come to a grinding halt. Chaos rippled through Clover Field as parents and volunteers tried to figure out how to continue the show without a functioning sound system. Some folks ran to see if the generator was malfunctioning, while others hunted for spare cables. A few children sat on the grass, disappointed tears in their eyes as they clutched their guitars or lyric sheets. In the midst of the confusion, Karen strolled back onto the field, a hint of satisfaction lurking beneath her calm demeanor. She positioned herself near the stage, surveying the flustered crowd. When someone asked if she knew anything about the sabotage, she flashed an offended expression. "I'm sure I have no idea," she replied. "But perhaps this is the universe's way of telling us that we've had enough racket for one day." One furious father confronted her directly. "Did you cut those cables?" he demanded, voice trembling with anger. "What kind of person would do that to a kid's show?" Karen huffed. "Don't be absurd. I would never commit vandalism. I'm only saying that maybe it's time we respect the peace and quiet around here. After all, the HOA guidelines are very clear about noise disruptions." I noticed the volume creeping higher. Perhaps if we'd adhered more closely to the rules, none of this would have happened. Her words, though a deniable statement of guilt, carried a chilling undertone. It was as if she relished the notion that the show was forced to stop. She added, "Children can perform in many ways. Do they really need an amplifier? Maybe it's best if the show ends now." Sylvia, overhearing this, approached with a fierce determination in her eyes. "We're not canceling," she said firmly. "The kids have practiced for weeks, and we only have a few performances left. We'll figure something out." Karen's lips curled in a half-smile. "Suit yourself. But if you can't follow the guidelines, I wouldn't be surprised if the HOA board revokes permission for any future events. We simply cannot have these disruptions." Then, with an air of condescension, she turned and walked away from the stage, leaving an aura of dread in her wake. The tension was palpable. Could the show continue without the proper sound setup? Some parents felt deflated, assuming the event was ruined. Others glared at Karen's retreating form, outraged by her thinly veiled sabotage. But despite the confusion, a few determined souls refused to let the day end in defeat. Sylvia and her volunteers gathered backstage for an emergency huddle. The overhead sun beat down on them, intensifying the pressure. "We still have at least 6 acts to go," Sylvia said, voice trembling. "Some of these kids have been rehearsing for months. We can't let them down." A father named Brian Llewellyn, an amateur sound engineer, stepped forward. "I have a battery-powered amplifier in my garage," he said. "It's small, but it'll work for a single mic. No extension cords needed. I can race home and get it." Another volunteer, a teenage boy with an interest in electronics, offered to rewire a couple of portable microphones to run off batteries. "We might only get partial amplification," he admitted, "but it should be enough for the kids to be heard if the crowd's quiet." Encouraged by these solutions, Sylvia nodded. "Let's do it. Maybe we can't fix everything, but we can at least salvage the show." She paused to look at the children still waiting anxiously. "We owe them that." In a flurry of movement, Brian sprinted off to grab his battery-powered gear. The teenage volunteer rummaged through a crate of old microphone parts and wires. Meanwhile, parents offered to help hush the audience so the kids' unamplified voices could carry. The sense of teamwork was palpable. Even neighbors who had not planned to stay for the entire show stepped up, offering to guide kids or manage the makeshift stage. A few mothers formed a circle around the younger children, comforting them with gentle words and promising the show would go on. Within half an hour, Brian returned with a boxy amplifier, about the size of a toolbox. He and the teen volunteer quickly connected a handheld mic, tested it, and cheered when scratchy feedback confirmed it worked. The volume wasn't huge, but in an outdoor setting with a cooperative audience, it might suffice. Sylvia hopped onto the stage, microphone in hand. A hush fell over the crowd. She took a deep breath, determined to exude confidence despite her pounding heart. "Thank you, everyone, for your patience," she said. Her voice sounded a bit tinny through the small amp, but at least it was audible. "We experienced a technical setback, but thanks to some quick thinking, we have a workaround. We're not done here." Applause erupted, followed by relieved laughter. The children waiting to perform exchanged hopeful glances. Sylvia gestured for the next act, a shy boy with a clarinet, to step up. He walked on stage, head high, clarinet in hand. Though the sound system was far from perfect, the crowd quieted enough that his notes carried sweetly across Clover Field. Each measure rang out with the unwavering message. Nothing could kill the spirit of the day. Despite the improvised setup, the talent show continued. A 10-year-old girl performed an earnest rendition of a Disney tune, holding the handheld mic close to her mouth, so every note reached the audience. Next, a brave teenager recited a monologue from A Midsummer Night's Dream, clearly relieved to have at least partial amplification for her performance. The repeated hiss of feedback and the crackle of the battery pack were minor nuisances, overshadowed by the family's delight that the show was alive. Off to the side, Karen watched with a mix of annoyance and disbelief. It appeared her sabotage, though it had caused disruption, had not ended the event. Neighbors nearby couldn't help but notice the scowl crossing her face every time a child received applause. Meanwhile, the rest of the audience seemed to feed off the triumph. Every time an act finished, the cheers sounded louder, as if celebrating not just the performance but the resilience that overcame adversity. When the final performer, a 13-year-old boy, took the stage with a keyboard, the small amplifier squeaked in protest. Nonetheless, with some fiddling, the microphone picked up enough of his singing to convey his heartfelt pop ballad. He ended to thunderous applause. Children clapped gleefully, parents jumped up from lawn chairs to applaud, and a warm sense of camaraderie lit up Clover Field. Sylvia returned to the stage one last time, tearful from relief. "Give it up for all our wonderful performers," she called, her voice cracking with emotion. The crowd roared, raising homemade signs and cheering the kids. "You prove that no matter what happens, we can come together and make something beautiful." In that moment, Karen's presence receded like a bad dream. The families looked at their talented children under the bright sunshine and felt a pride that overshadowed any attempt at sabotage. Even Walter Leong, the HOA president, had arrived to see the last few acts, and he was visibly moved. He walked on stage and took the mic from Sylvia. "I think we've learned a lesson here about the strength of community spirit," he said, shooting Karen a pointed glance from behind his glasses. "And I, for one, hope this becomes an annual tradition." Another cheer rang out, followed by shouts of agreement. An annual event, one that Karen had tried to destroy, was now poised to become a fixture of Pinewood Acres. A few folks cast sideways looks at Karen, who slipped into the background, face tight with annoyance. The moment belonged to the children, the parents, and the unstoppable determination that had saved the day. In the aftermath of the talent show, Pinewood Acres buzzed with talk of Karen's underhanded maneuver. Although no one had caught her red-handed slicing the cables, the mystery saboteur left behind enough evidence, cut wires, footprints behind the hedges, to fuel widespread suspicion. Several residents voiced anger that the sabotage had targeted children's performances. A few demanded that Karen be removed from her HOA position. Yet, lacking definitive proof, the board hesitated to take drastic measures. Karen vehemently denied involvement. But ironically, Karen's destructive act only strengthened the event's reputation. Families recounted how the community had rallied to fix the situation, praising the ingenuity of those who found backup gear. Local parents who missed the show read the enthusiastic recaps on the neighborhood forum and vowed to attend next year. Walter Leong himself posted a message, calling the day a testament to Pinewood Acres' unity and the resilience of our youth. In the weeks that followed, a surge of excitement gripped the neighborhood. Parents discussed bigger plans for future talent shows, maybe a small concession stand, or better backup equipment in case of technical difficulties. Some kids, who had been too shy to perform this time, declared they would practice diligently for next year. Others began forming little singing or dance troupes, eager to dazzle the community when the next event rolled around. Meanwhile, Karen retreated to her usual routine, sending out official memos about lawn care, measuring fences, and occasionally complaining about foot traffic near her property. But her status as an influential force had diminished. More and more neighbors viewed her as an obstacle to community spirit rather than its champion. A rumor spread that she had left footprints behind the stage area, matching the scuff marks near the cables. Though never confirmed in a legal sense, most believed the rumor wholeheartedly. Sylvia Dawson, the de facto organizer of the show, received an outpouring of thanks. In a private conversation, Walter Leong assured her that the HOA would support future children's events. "We may not be able to remove Karen from her position," he admitted with regret. "But rest assured, we won't let her hamper something so positive again. We'll create a dedicated fund for community gatherings, so you'll have better resources next time. Consider that official." Sylvia was deeply moved. She realized the day's adversity had ignited a spark in Pinewood Acres. Children would remember that they could overcome obstacles, technical or otherwise, if everyone pulled together. The neighbors, though still subject to the usual suburban squabbles, had experienced a shared victory, binding them closer than before. As the warm days of June slid into the hotter weeks of July, life in Pinewood Acres continued as it always did, mowing lawns, painting fences, attending block parties. Yet something in the air felt changed. A spirit of hope, of quiet defiance, had blossomed. And ironically, Karen's sabotage had played a part in forging that deeper community bond. A few months later, the HOA newsletter featured a front-page story. Community talent show deemed a success. Plans underway for annual tradition. Photos of smiling kids with mics in hand brightened the page, a testament to the unstoppable power of collaboration. When next year's show rolled around, likely with sturdier cables and backup batteries, no one doubted it would be bigger, louder, and more joyous than ever. That unstoppable wave of enthusiasm, ironically enough, was Karen's unintended legacy.